This is an interview with Mrs. Ludie Walcott. She was born on September 8, 1872, near what is now McAlester, Oklahoma. Her first trip to Ardmore was in 1893. She came to live in Ardmore in December of 1894. The date of this interview is February 22, 1956. The place is 218 D Street Southwest, Ardmore, Oklahoma. And now, Mrs. Walcott, would you like to tell us about that first trip you had here to Ardmore?
Yes, I came to Ardmore in June in 1893, soon after I had graduated from a girls' school college in Clinton, Missouri. And I came right on over here to the wedding of Lee Cruz and Chick LaFleur. And Lee Cruz was later on was the second governor of Oklahoma after we had statehood. And she had a very big church wedding at the Methodist Church, and then it was down there right where the that filling station is. They're building a new filling station there, right across from the Gilbert Building, south of the Gilbert Building, and the Methodist Church was there, and so we had a big. I think there were about 6 bridesmaids, and same groomsmen, and Mr. Walcott was one of the groomsmen. And that was the first time that I had ever met him. Of course, there were a lot of young men here in Ardmore at that time. And we all had a grand time. Of course, he thought I was just some kid about 15 years old. But he soon got his eyes opened up when he come back over to McAlester, and then the other boys begun to court me. Then he come in. And then we were married over there in December and came back to Ardmore in 1894. And we had rented a room from Joe F. Williams, who lived there on 1st Avenue and B Street in that vacant lot where the Altrusa Club owns now. And it was right across from where the courthouse was. And the old Cumberland Presbyterian Church was there then, not the courthouse. Mm-hmm. And we lived there then long until about, April. And we had rented a small house from I.R. Mason up on 2nd Avenue, 1st Avenue, 2nd Avenue, right across from the high school building. Yeah. And I remember that was about the time they had the big fire, and we had to pack part of the things. We went down there, everybody was rushing around, moving things around, so we went down there and moved a trunk or two and up to this little house that night of the fire. And then we lived there along about March. In the meantime, they were building our home out northwest of Ardmore, and we lived there till about March. Then we moved out to this new home and lived there. I lived there a long time. Started in this Ringland Railroad, and the road went right through, was surveyed through Frank Frensley's home. So of course he had to have a home. So we sold a house then to Frank Frensley, and he lived there quite a while. He had several children. Then he sold the place to Dr. Von Keller. And that's the reason why I think they call it the Von Keller home. But it was really the Walcott home was built there first. And so then we had built our home down south of Ardmore, what we call Walcott Addition now. Yeah. And we lived there until the place Mr. Walcott passed on, and then I sold the place. And I'm just bumming around now.
Well, you mentioned something about the fire. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yes, that big fire. It was down on Caddo, and it started in T.B. Cathy's livery stable. Of course, we had livery stables then in horse and buggy days, you know. Of course, everybody had horses and buggies. And the fire started in there, and it came south on Caddo Street up to Main Street. And all the buildings across the street on both sides were burned clear up to Washington Street. And that was a terrible, terrible fire then. But Ardmore recovered and built itself up again. And I used to have a lot of pictures of that fire, and a lot of pictures of Long Ardmore. But when I broke up housekeeping, I gave it to the Ardmorite, but I don't know what they've ever done with the book, because I don't think they've ever printed any of the pictures. I've never seen them anyway.
Yeah. Well, that part down in there that all burned, that was just about the main section of town at that time, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Yes, Caddo, and then Main Street, too. Mm-hmm. Of course, they had some pretty nice buildings up to pretty near to the Washington.
Oh, the town was about 3 blocks long then.
Well, it was hardly 3 blocks long. I guess it was pretty near that.
Did it go any past the railroad?
No, not east of the railroad at all. It was all west of the railroad.
Oh, I see.
Because you see, where the railroad's that way is where the station is now. And, of course, Caddo, which is, well, they call it 8th Street Northeast now, but it'll always be Caddo.
Yeah, that's right.
Bloody Caddo, as we called it. And it was always be there. And I remember that the first hospital they had in Ardmore was there on Caddo and Main Street, up above the Martin drugstore. Yeah. Dr. Hardy and I believe Dr. Henry first started that hospital there. That's the first hospital that I remember that they had here in Ardmore. Of course, he moved on over to the other place then.
Right close to treat all the people that got hurt on Caddo.
Yeah, they certainly did.
Okay, and now, last time I visited, you were telling about the big celebration they had over Ardmore's birthday, and it's not anything compared to, now it's not anything compared to what it was then. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, of course, Ardmore's birthday is in July, and they always celebrated out there in Whittington Park. And then for days, people would come from all over the country, driving their wagons, and they'd come there and camp. And they would, the people would, I guess the merchants here in town would furnish the beef, and they'd have barbecue for everybody, free barbecue and free coffee. And they'd build big platforms out there, and they would dance, and they'd have political meetings and political talks and dancing and most all of the square dancing, though. And the people, as I say, would come and park out there for 3 or 4 days and always bring wagon loads of watermelons. That was in July. Yeah. And everybody had a good time, and that was our regular time of meeting. It was always in July for Ardmore's birthday. But I don't know how long that lasted. Then it kind of dropped down when we begun to get to be a little city. Of course, that was a country town then, I guess. But we had good times.
Were there any houses out and around in there?
Oh, not many. Very, very few, I remember of it all. No, that was just a park out there, you know. Of course, it isn't as nice a park as it is now, just the woods and everything. But it was a beautiful old place to camp, and they always called it Whittington Park. Yeah. I suppose Mr. Whittington used to live out there. I don't know.
Well, and you were telling me about a political rally.
Oh, yes, now, they didn't think the Indian Territory had politics, but they did. And, of course, they had no votes in the National Convention, but they had, I guess they'd call them a National Committeeman, I don't know. But I know they had a big convention over here in Ardmore in 1900, and out here at the cotton mill, they had a big platform out there, and there's where they held the convention. And there was Dr. Wolverton here from Ardmore was running, and Mr. Markham from Muskogee, I've forgotten his name. They were running for National Committeeman, and that was the time that Williams Jennings Bryan was running for President of the United States. Of course, they could go to the convention, but they didn't have much vote. But they had a big time. I think this convention must have lasted 2 or 3 days, because I remember one incident down there at the Whittington Hotel. It got so hot there, some arguments among some men. I think one man from Muskogee, I suppose the others from Ardmore. But they had a big argument down there one morning at breakfast, and some fellow picked up a molasses pitcher and threw it at the other fellow.
Oh, goodness.
So they just had a big clue. But, of course, Dr. Wolverton didn't win. The Muskogee man won and went to the convention. But that was one of the big conventions they had here before statehood. They had many of them there.
Well, you mentioned that was in the summer. Would you like to give us a picture of how the winters were then?
Well, we had some pretty cold winters, though. I think the weather has changed quite a bit especially since I was a child. Even after I came here to Ardmore, we had cold, very cold weather. I remember one year, I don't know if it was 98 or 99, in February, we had what we called a blue norther, and the wind just turned that quick from the north. And then we had a big snow, and I think it was a foot or so deep, and stayed on for a week. Everybody went sleigh riding, and there was a pond called McClish Pond out here in the southwest. Of course, Dick McClish owned all of this part of the country then, and they had the McClish Pond, and it froze over so hard that people went out there to skate, ice skate. We skated all over that pond. go sleigh riding and hitch up your, had bobsleds, and then they'd hitch the horses, take the wheels off of the buggies, and just put them on runners. So we did have some mighty cold winters, but I think they're getting warmer now. Summers are getting hotter too, I think.
But did you have ice skates, or did you just more or less slide?
Mostly slide. Some few people that had come from the north that lived down here,
Oh, yeah.
They had ice skates because they, but people who always lived here never had any ice skates.
I was just wondering if any of the stores sold them. I mean, they don't now, I don't think.
No, they didn't have them because we didn't have enough ice here.
Yeah,
very often.
I can see that.
Yeah.
And so you think that the winters are definitely getting warmer?
Yes, I think they are. I think the weather's changing. Yes, we don't have near the cold weather we used to have. Cold enough for me, however.
Me too. It's all right with me.
Yeah, me too. Quite a number of young people. Of course, it was made up of young people because there are so many young lawyers came out from this part of the country, so many young people, that we had all kind of parties. We had dances. We had dances up in the Elk Hall. That was there on Broadway. And then we had what we call the Algonquin Club. And then we had card parties. And we had everything that way, anything you could think of. And we had I remember we used to go to the elk dances there. I just had 2 children then. We'd take the 2 girls to the dance, and take a quilt, make a little pallet for them. They'd sleep while we were all dancing, then we'd bring them home. But when the others came, I quit. Yeah. And you
were telling me about the opera house.
Oh, yes, we had 2 opera houses. I think the first opera house we had was what we call the Klosky Opera House. And that was down up over where Tom Etzel's place of business is now. The building, I think, belonged to Klosky. But we had that Klosky House. And we had a lot of amateur plays here. A lot of the people like that. We used to have, of course, I was in them all.
Like our little theater
now. Yeah, just like a little theater now, but we had a lot of them, and we had one down there at the Klosky Opera House. And then later on, we had what we called the Robinson Opera House. And we had lots of good operas here, too, that would travel part of the country. And that was up over the A&P, where the A&P grocery store is up there. That was Robinson Building. And we had one up there. We had the county fair. And I always think about that. I've got a clipping about that county fair. And so we always had something to do. Even if we didn't have the cars to get around in, we'd get around with our horse and buggies. But there were lots of parties and things. And since this is Washington's birthday, why, one time when we lived out northwest there, we had a masquerade, had a George Washington party, and everybody came in costume. And we had a wonderful time there. And everybody did, and we always did. No matter they always got there. No matter how far you're out, they'd get there. But
that was really out in the country at that time,
Oh,
wasn't it?
Yes, I was way out in the country then. Seemed like I've always kind of lived in the country.
Yeah.
And this was down south of town, was in the country for a long time.
Yeah, I imagine.
But, well, as I say, there were so many young people here. They all was something doing, anyhow.
Well, what did you have in the way of a theater?
Oh, you mean before the picture show started? Well, I think the Lowenstein boys had about the first what they call the Air Dome, and that was all out of the air. And then we had moving pictures that not talking ones. And everybody went to the picture show, went to the Air Dome. And Amelia Hunter here used to sing. They'd always have someone to sing a song, and then they'd illustrate the song, perhaps. Or in fixing the shows, they'd always tell what was happening next. And Amelia Hunter used to sing there down at the Air Dome.
You say wasn't in an enclosed building?
No, that's really why I called it Air Dome.
Oh, like our drive-ins now.
Yes, very much like the drive-ins, I guess. Only they were not talking pictures at all. The first we had here.
I see. telling me earlier about a bridge party you had. Would you like to tell us about that?
Oh, yes, we had a big bridge club here, and met every Thursday afternoon. And one time they met with me, and of course I lived out in the country, didn't have any neighbors to borrow things from, because I think we had about 12 tables. So we had served, I had counted noses and had served just so many cups. Well, we were short one cup, because I knew one lady didn't drink coffee. So I was short a cup, and I went there, I said, Miss Simpson, what are you doing to that cup of coffee? I said, you don't drink coffee, and I need that cup. See, well, I took it because Miss Foster said she wanted an extra one. I said, well, I'll give her an extra, but I want that cup because I'm short of cups. So we had great times at our card parties, though. They lasted a long time. We had big times here. Everybody played and met in their homes then. Now they have very few people have parties in their homes. They have them in clubs and different places like this. Not near lots of fun, years fun. Of course, it's less work, I reckon. But we had awfully good times having our parties that way.
But don't you think one reason people don't entertain in their homes anymore is that they're so much smaller than they were
Well,
then?
that's the truth. Everybody in those times always had big homes, you know, and they had a great big parlors, we called them. Everybody had a big parlor and a big dining room, and now they're just small homes they don't have the room for, and I guess they have to go to clubs.
You said you had 12 tables at your party. Could you get all those in one room?
Oh, no, it was a pretty good-sized room, and I had double doors between, you know. And, of course, we had what we call the parlor. And then the big dining room had double doors there, and then double doors out into a large hall. So in that way we did. And by the way, when the children used to come out there to dance, we just opened up all those doors, and they just danced. My children and all their crowd would dance all around there. And we always had a crowd. See, I had 5 children.
Yes.
And they're all little different ages there, and each one had their own crowd. And they'd bring them out there. And they'd all come in a bunch because they're afraid to come out by themselves because they had to cross a railroad and everything that way. And they would throw open those old doors and have their dances out there. Bring out their orchestra.
Like a modern ballroom.
Yes, it sure was. They had a grand time, too. We had lots of fun out there. One night there were just about 2 of us in the house. Next morning there were 10. But we just say, well, how on earth did you ever take care of all those children? Well, I just make a few more biscuits and a little more milk gravy and put them down to it. And if they didn't like it, they didn't come back anymore, but they all came back.
Yeah, I bet they didn't complain.
Oh, no. Mr. Walcott was so good about it, you know. Never bothered him. The more there were, the better he liked it. Well, we had grand times there.
Well, there was a lot of social activity going on then. Well, how about telling us the more or less slogan that the girls said about Ardmore?
Oh. Well, it wasn't that. Well, that was when the Dawes Commission first opened up, you know, in this part of the country to settle up the allotments for the Indians. And, of course, that brought in a lot of lawyers, a lot of young men, engineers and surveyors and things like that. And Ardmore was one of the headquarters down here, so we had plenty of young people here. And it got so that every time a girl would come over here to visit Ardmore from any town or out of the state or anything, they always came back a bride, and we used up most of our young men.
But there are a lot of young girls coming visiting.
Oh, yes, plenty of them. Plenty of them. I was one of them.
Oh, I see. Well, I understand that this hasn't always been Carter County.
No, in Indian Territory days, of course, they didn't call them counties then, I don't believe. I think they called them districts. This was called Pickens County. And after statehood, it was named for Judge Ben Carter, who was the father of Charlie Carter, our congressman, first congressman from the 3rd District when we became a state. And Judge Carter was a Cherokee Indian, and his wife was a Chickasaw Indian. But he was a very prominent man here in Ardmore those days. So was Charlie Carter. And he reared a family here of 3 girls and a boy. And so that's how this got to be named here, Carter County.
And what about the twin girls?
Oh, yes, they were cousins of Charlie Carter's. They're Chick and Chalk. Of course, they were born over in the Choctaw Nation. Their mother was a Choctaw. Their father was a Chickasaw. So they called the twins Chick and Choc. And they went by those names all their lives.
What was their real name?
Lorena and Serena LaFleur.
Well, that was the one that you attended their wedding.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Uh-huh. The style of the clothes then?
Well, do you mean grown people or children?
Well, both.
Well, I guess we all wore our dresses clear down to our ankles anyhow, because I know that we never wore short dresses until long in the 20s, and of course that was after statehood. But we wore those, and we had to make them all. I made all my children's clothes, nearly all they had. Even made their coats and bonnets and caps, everything that way. Had to learn, and I didn't know how either, but I learned. I had a nice machine, and we could buy a few clothes, but not many ready-made. They nearly all had to be made at home or by dressmakers. Of course, we had regular dressmakers here then, and with my own clothes, I had to have a dressmaker made. But I made all my children's clothes.
About how long
Poor girls.
Do you think it would take you to make a dress for one of your girls, say?
Well, it's according to which way I'd make them. Not very long. I could make 2-3 in a day or two, something like that, I guess.
You couldn't work much at night, could you?
Well, no, we didn't work much at night because we didn't have very good lights. Of course, we only had lamps then. Coal oil lamps is all we had, the lighting at all. We didn't have anything. Especially down in our part of town, too. We didn't get the electric lights until about 1909, I guess, or 10, or after they built the Confederate home, before we ever had electric lights where I lived. But we had plenty of coal oil lamps, big one, nice ones. And so we went to bed early, though. We didn't sit up late at night. We
no
went to a party.
television to watch.
Oh, no televisions, no telephones for a long time. Oh, I can remember when we first began to get these radios, I guess you'd call it. It was those little wax graphophones, that's what it was, graphophone like that, little wax around. And had those great big horns. Well, of course, we had one of those, and the children would play those. And I remember of Haley, the boy, used to go in there and he'd lock all the doors. He'd put that on and play, and then he'd learn to dance by himself in there.
Oh.
And that was the music that we had. Of course, we had a piano, of course. I had 2 daughters that played very well in music. One of them was graduate music. So we had plenty of music, things that way.
Were they on records like we have today?
No, not those kind. They were kind of round, little round records, the Edison. You never did see one before your time. But they were round, just about this long and round like that. They put in, but they called a graphophone, I think it was. And it came out. You've seen this picture of his master's voice, the little dog.
Yes.
Well, that's the kind of a horn we had, and that's the first we had.
Oh.
And of course it went on then. Now I have TV, everybody.
Well, how did you heat your homes then?
Well, they had burned coal or wood. We had fireplaces, and then we had coal stoves too, and we cooked with wood though. And we didn't get the gas until kind of late. Oh, I suppose, I don't know, but anyway, living out at the edge of town out there, we had to put in our own pipes for gas, and also for water too. Did all that ourselves. And finally, when we got the electric lights, we had to put up the poles and pay for the poles and the lights and things that way. Now they've taken all that into the city, and they get those things.
And you had a well for your water?
Oh yes, we had a well and a windmill, you see, and a big tank. And of course, keep that wind. We had all the conveniences nearly.
Did you have it piped into the house?
Oh yes, yes. We had a bath and everything like that. Oh, I even had that out yonder.
Oh really?
Yes.
You say you cooked with the wood. What did you cook? I mean, you had to cook everything you had, didn't you?
Yes, we did, because you didn't buy much of anything ready cooked. We had our own gardens and vegetables and things like that. And the only thing we'd ever buy in there was sugar and flour and coffee, something like that. But we raised everything there at home, just like all good farmers do.
You had your own garden, huh?
Own garden, orchard, vineyard, and berries and everything like that. The chickens and cows and everything else.
Do you have about the same assortment of things in your garden that people have now?
Yes, I think so. We didn't do much canning of vegetables, though. I did a lot of preserving and making jelly and preserves and things, but I didn't do much canning. I don't know, we just took care of things that way.
Well, what about your meat?
Oh, we killed meat. We had hogs, and we killed hogs and put up our own lard and everything like that, you know. I was never raised in the country, but I sure learned a lot of the country ways after I was married. We had everything. Of course, we could get them later on, you know, you could get fresh meat in town. And we had a lot of beef like that, but we always put up our hogs.
Oh, I see.
Meat, that way. Lard. We always cooked with lard. And we always had cow.
Had your own milk and butter.
Oh, yes, plenty of that, and good old butter, too.
Yes, something you can't hardly get nowadays.
Yeah. No, you can't. But we did, and such good butter.
You were showing me your photograph album a while ago. Do you happen to remember the first photographer that was here?
Well, I think the first one that was here when I came was a man by the name of W.C. Downing. And his sister is still living here, and some of his people are still living here. Of course, he took all the pictures in of everybody, and I think he took the pictures of us and my wedding dress. I had my picture made in my wedding dress. And then later on, my children, he took the pictures of each one of my children. So I don't know how long Mr. Downing had it, but he was one of the best photographers there at that time. Of course, now, a long time ago, when I was a child, we used to have tintypes. Didn't you see those tintypes?
Yes.
Yeah, we had tintypes then, but now, of course, but I guess it's improved a whole lot, like everything else has improved.
Do you happen to remember who the first druggist was?
Well, I think it was W.B. Frame. He had his drugstore here, and his people are still living here. His son is still, Tom is down as a pharmacist down there at the Henley drugstore now. So some of them, and his daughter still lives here. So I think W.B. Frame was among the first druggists here.
Where was his drugstore located?
I don't believe I can tell you.
Well, do you remember anything the kind of drugs he had in it?
No.
Oh.
Just like we have now, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Walcott, for the interview. This interview has been conducted by Kay Butler, senior in Ardmore High School, the 1955-56 term. When she was 9 years old. Mrs. Sigler was one for the interview. This interview has been conducted by Kay Butler, senior in Ardmore High School, the 1955-56 term.